Residents have protested an industrial development in North Mankato, including at last night's city council meeting.
Now a lawsuit over big data centers challenges the city's environmental processes. Aaron Stuvey explains.
Council, kill this project now.
Trust with the community has been broken and will be hard to mend.
The city needs to seriously consider how it gathers information, who they can rely on for accurate information, and how to engage citizens more fully.
Monday's North Mankato City Council meeting was one of controversy and emotion. The issue in question is the approval of a development plan for the city's industrial district. That plan was done through an alternative urban area-wide review, or AUAR. An AUAR is a type of environmental impact review approved by the state that combines certain aspects of multiple other impact studies. Alongside the review is an NDA for the city, an issue that meeting attendees took issue with.
How is an NDA transparent? Non-disclosure. It's about as transparent as a 1-inch steel plate.
Now the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy has filed a lawsuit against the city, as well as the city of Lakeville, alleging that the city did not legally administer the review. They argue that the stated use of the study was too vague to qualify as a legal use of the program. The city, in a statement at Monday's meeting, disagrees.
The city maintains that its use of the AUAR process was lawful and appropriate.
The lawsuit alleges that the development plan will be used to construct a large data center in North Mankato, and that such a facility would have major impacts to the local environment and water resources. For their part, North Mankato officials say they're not considering any specific proposal for a data center. But with the new lawsuit expected to take time working through the courts, the future of the development will remain up in the air for now. In North Mankato, Aaron Stuvey, KUIC News Now.
The council did pass an independent environmental action plan which aims to guide the city's future practices and was developed in part by some of the residents at yesterday's meeting.